weekend's Capitol Report. Pat McGuigan is here, and this week, Michigan became the 24th state to pass right-to-work legislation. Big deal. Lots of people fired up about that in Michigan. But what does it mean for the unions, and what's it going to do for their economy?
Problem with just a few minutes is trying to answer those great questions. Here's the first thing. This is a direct challenge to union power in one of the most powerful states for the unions in America. And it comes in a context. The context is Indiana passed right to work in January. In Wisconsin, a massive union effort to punish Scott Walker for curbing union power, not passing a right to work provision, but curbing union power. And now this in Michigan, all within a year, all within the so-called Rust Belt. So we're not talking ancient history, and we're not talking southern states, most of which have already taken this step, like Oklahoma did. You're talking about a very dramatic shift in the political culture. The union leaders probably went a bridge too far, and to some extent brought them on themselves. There's always a problem in politics and policy, and it goes both ways, conservative, liberal, in between, and that's with overreaching. They tried to pass Proposition 2 in Michigan, and the governor and others begged them not to force that fight. And it would have essentially guaranteed public sector unionization, which ironically many founding leaders of the American labor movement were opposed to public sector unionism for very pragmatic and principled reasons. Nonetheless, back to the story, they were begged not to force that fight. They forced it. They caused this fight. They brought it on. They were feeling so bold and confident. Well, here's what happened. Barack Obama carried the state 53% of the vote. Proposition 2, the union effort power grab, got 42%. That's not complex. That means that union households were opposing the union leadership. And just as happened in Oklahoma, when about, I'd say 25 to 30%, depending on how you look at the underlying data, of union households supported right to work. If this battle is forced in a voting setting, the same thing will happen. Some union households will break against their leadership. Now, eventually, what does this mean? Eventually it will mean economic progress for Michigan, and it'll mean economic progress for companies that have lots of union members in their workforce. So it will be, but eventually means eventually. It took about 2 years in Oklahoma with litigation. In Michigan, I don't think you'll see dramatic forward-propelling economic changes until after the 2014 election, unless the union leaders ease up, because they're saying they're going to go after all of the supporters and they're going to try to beat them in elections. But then you'll have 2 years of right-to-work history, and you'll have odd situations like in Arkansas, for example, Bill Clinton was an advocate of right to work until he ran for president and needed the union support. It's the same all over the country. Democratic governors recognize what right to work does for a state.
Okay, now Oklahoma passed right to work here in our state back in 2001. What has it done for our economy?
Well, Oklahoma was always a place where any business analyst or economist would look and they'd see good workers, maybe not skilled enough, but good workers, people willing to work hard, needed to work on the skills, and we still do. Good locations all over the state because of the highways and our central location, and low costs. Particularly appealing in a lot of areas, particularly appealing in manufacturing, assembly, transportation-related issues. What passage of right to work in Oklahoma did was it guaranteed freedom for workers, individuals like myself. When I was teaching, I could not join the American Federation of Teachers because of my philosophical disagreements with their positions on a whole lot of issues. So it gave workers a right to choose. But more importantly, perhaps economically, it sent a message to companies that they're not going to have to worry about, being a little bit anachronistic here, worry about a hostess type scenario where a 2-week strike shuts you down. That doesn't mean the company was managed perfectly. It means it was a 2-week strike that led to the closure of that company. Productivity is up in Oklahoma. Manufacturing and GDP has improved. For a while, Oklahoma actually led the country in manufacturing jobs. We're seeing a reverse grapes of wrath with people coming back from California. This is historic stuff. 5.2% unemployment in Oklahoma versus 7.7% nationally. The future is bright, unless, and that brings us back to a prior topic, the cliff.
Okay.
The fiscal cliff and all the things tied to it. The future is bright for Oklahoma unless Oklahoma is Exhibit A on the effectiveness of right to work as a public policy revision.
Okay, so another reason to be grateful we're living in Oklahoma.
Well, I think so, certainly.
I think so too. All right, thanks, Pat. Have a great weekend, folks.